The market was loud, full of voices, colors and smells, but in the middle of it all, one alien orphan stood alone, small and unwanted. She was thin, her clothes torn, and her eyes looked tired. She carried a small basket of dry bread, the only food she had for the day. Her steps were weak, and the crowd pushed her from side to side. Nobody cared about her to the people of her kind. She was not a female worth noticing. They called her useless, weak, and unworthy of any bond. No one ever offered her kindness. No one ever looked at her as something more than a shadow. She was there, but also invisible, that day. As she walked through the busy street, a group of young aliens blocked her way. They laughed and whispered cruel words. One of them kicked her basket, and the bread fell to the ground. The crowd around laughed, pointing at the poor orphan as if she were part of the entertainment. Her heart sank and she dropped to her knees, quickly trying to gather the pieces of bread from the dust. But before she could pick up the last piece, a large boot came down and crushed it into the dirt. The young aliens laughed louder. Who would ever want her? One shouted, "She's nothing, not even a real female." Another said. Their words cut deeper than the hunger she always felt. The orphan lowered her head, her small hands shaking. Her people had already decided her worth. She had none. She was a burden, a mistake left behind. Her stomach growled, but the bread was gone, and her hope was smaller than ever. But then, something strange happened. In the middle of the laughter, one figure did not move, did not join the mockery. A human stood there, tall, quiet, his face unreadable. His eyes, however, were fixed on the orphan. Not with laughter, not with pity, but with something else. Something she had never seen before. Recognition. The crowd noticed his stare and began to laugh at him too. Why is the human watching her? One alien said, "Does he think she's worth his time?" Another mocked. But the human did not reply. He stepped forward slowly, his boots steady on the dusty ground. The orphan looked up, her eyes wide. Her people were cruel, but humans. She had heard stories about them, that they were strange, unpredictable, sometimes dangerous. Fear and confusion mixed inside her chest. Why was he walking toward her? What did he want? The young alien stepped aside, curious. Their laughter softened into whispers. The human crouched down near the orphan, his hand moved, not to strike, not to take, but to offer. He picked up the last piece of bread that had not been ruined and placed it back into her hands. "You drop this," he said simply. His voice was calm, deep, and strangely warm. The orphan froze. Her throat was dry and words would not come. Nobody had ever picked something up for her before. Nobody had ever given her back what she lost. She clutched the dirty piece of bread to her chest. As if it were treasure, the human did not leave. Instead, he reached into his pocket and placed a few coins into the merchant's hand. The merchant blinked in surprise, not sure why a human would waste money on the orphan. But the human only said, "Give her fresh food." The crowd gasped. The young aliens laughed again, louder than before. "He's crazy." One said, "Wasting money on her?" Another shouted. The whispers spread like fire. Aliens pointed and mocked, but the human ignored them. He turned to the orphan again. His eyes met hers, steady and sure. "You deserve better," he said. The orphan's heart stopped for a moment. Her people had told her she deserved nothing. She was worthless, forgotten, invisible. But this human, this stranger, had said the opposite. His words felt strange. Heavy and dangerous. Could they be true? Her lips trembled. She wanted to speak, but fear held her back. What if this was another trick? What if he was only mocking her in a different way? Her people were cruel? Why should a human be different? But the human did not laugh, did not move away. He only stood there, waiting, as if he had all the time in the world. His presence was strong, solid, and for the first time, the orphan felt like someone saw her, not as a shadow, not as a mistake, but as a being who mattered. The market grew quieter. Everyone stared, some with shock, some with anger. The orphan's small hands shook as she held the bread close. Her stomach hurt with hunger, but her chest hurt even more, with something new, something she had never felt before. Hope. That night, as the sun sank and the market lights flickered on, the human was still near, watching her, not leaving, not mocking. The orphan sat on the cold stone steps, holding her bread, wondering who this man was and why. Out of everyone in the galaxy, he had chosen to see her. For the first time in her life, she was not invisible. And that was the beginning of everything. The night was colder than usual. The alien orphan sat on the stone steps of the market, her small hands still clutching the bread the human had given back to her. She didn't eat it yet, not because she wasn't hungry, but because it felt like more than food. It was proof that anyone had noticed her. The human still stood nearby, silent. His figure was tall, a shadow against the glowing lanterns of the marketplace. The alien crowd had begun to scatter, their cruel laughter fading into the night, but whispers still floated in the air. Why is he wasting time on her? Humans are strange. Maybe he's broken in the head. The orphan lowered her gaze, her heart racing. Why hadn't he left yet? What did he want from her? No one stayed near her without a reason, and those reasons were never good. Finally, she whispered, her voice shaky. Why are you still here? The human looked at her. His eyes didn't carry the sharpness of her people. Instead, they carried patience, as if he wasn't in a hurry, as if her words mattered. Because no one else sees you, he said calmly. The orphan froze. She didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever spoken like that to her. To her people, she was invisible, not female, not worthy, not even alive in the way others were. Yet this man spoke as though she existed. Her throat tightened and she muttered, "I am nothing," but the human shook his head. "You are something." His tone was steady, not loud, but strong enough that even the passing merchants turned their heads for a moment. The orphan wanted to argue, to push his words away. Because hope was dangerous, hope made the hunger sharper, the loneliness deeper, but she couldn't. Because his eyes didn't look like lies. A group of aliens approached, the same ones who had mocked her earlier. They grinned, their sharp teeth glowing under the lanterns. "Look at this," one said. "The human thinks the orphan is worth his time." They stepped closer, circling. The orphan's heart began to pound. She wanted to vanish into the stone. She had always been alone when they came to hurt her. But this time she wasn't alone. The human stood, slow and deliberate. His height forced the young aliens to look up at him. His gaze was firm, not angry, not loud, but unshaken. "Leave," he said. The aliens blinked, taken aback. Nobody usually stood up for the orphan. Nobody challenged them, they laughed nervously. "Or what? You'll fight us over trash?" The orphan closed her eyes, waiting for the human to step back like everyone else did when it was easier to ignore her. But he didn't move. "Not trash," he said firmly. "She has a name." The orphan's eyes flew open. He didn't even know her name. He was waiting, looking down at her as if he expected her to say it. Her chest tightened. Her name felt like a secret, a word no one had spoken kindly for years. Her lips trembled, but she whispered, "Lyra." The human repeated it, clear and sure. Lyra. The sound of it on his tongue shocked her. It didn't sound like mockery. It sounded like the name belonged to someone who mattered. The crowd of aliens grew quieter, confused. The human didn't back down, and for the first time the bullies hesitated. They grumbled and spat on the ground before leaving, muttering curses under their breath. The orphan, Lyra, stared at the human. Her heart beat so fast she thought it would break her thin chest. Nobody had ever done that. Nobody had ever made others step away from her. She held the bread tighter, tears stinging her eyes. But she quickly looked away, ashamed to cry. The human knelt again, his voice low. "You don't have to stay here. You don't have to be what they call you." Her eyes widened in fear. "Where would I go?" He looked over his shoulder, pointing at a small ship docked at the edge of the market. It wasn't big, not fancy, just a working vessel with scratched paint and humming engines. "With me," he said simply. Lyra's breath caught. Her people would laugh, maybe even attack. Nobody would believe him. She herself didn't believe it. Was he serious? A human inviting her onto his ship? She shook her head quickly. No, I can't. You don't know me." "I know enough," he answered. His eyes stayed on hers, unblinking, steady. She wanted to run, to hide, because this couldn't be real. Nothing good ever lasted for her, but her legs didn't move. Her heart, traitorous and weak, whispered that maybe, just maybe, he was telling the truth. The marketplace grew quieter as the night deepened. But one thought burned in her mind, louder than all the whispers. All her life no one had seen her, no one had wanted her. No one had spoken her name with respect. And now a human stranger had done all three. The question remained, heavy and dangerous, why? And Lyra knew that answer would change everything. The next morning, the marketplace was alive again. Merchants shouted prices, children ran between stalls, and strange smells of roasted food filled the air. Lyra kept her hood low, trying to move quietly, but whispers still followed her. They always did this time. The whispers were louder than before because now they spoke of the human. "He defended her last night," one alien murmured. "He must be desperate," another laughed. "Maybe he is blind, or maybe humans have no taste," a third added with a cruel grin. Every word hit Lyra like a stone. Her people never forgot anything, and never forgave weakness by standing near the human. She had drawn more attention than she ever wanted. She wanted to disappear, but the human appeared again, moving through the crowd with slow, steady steps. His presence made the laughter soften, as though the air itself grew heavier when he walked. He carried a small bag of food and placed it gently in front of her. "You didn't eat enough yesterday," he said calmly. Lyra's throat tightened. The bag smelled warm and fresh, far better than the dirty bread she usually ate. She shook her head quickly. "No, I can't take this." "Yes, you can," he replied, his tone final. As if there was no debate, the crowd nearby began to laugh again. Louder this time, a group of aliens leaned closer, smirking. "Look at him. Buying food for the orphan? Does he think she will thank him with love?" The others roared with laughter. The sound made Lyra want to sink into the ground. Her face burned and she whispered, "Please, don't." But the human didn't back away. He looked at the mocking aliens, his eyes sharp now. "Why does kindness bother you?" The question cut through the noise. The aliens blinked, caught off guard. No one expected a human to question them. Especially not for her. They recovered quickly, snarling. "Because she isn't worth it. She isn't a female, she isn't anything. She is nothing, and you—" One alien pointed at him. "You are a fool for wasting your food and your money." The market froze, all eyes turned toward the human, waiting for him to step back, waiting for him to agree. That was the way things always worked. Nobody defended the orphan. Not twice, not in front of everyone, but the human didn't move. His voice was calm but strong enough to carry. "If she is nothing, then why are you also afraid of her receiving kindness?" Silence followed. The question hung in the air like a blade. The aliens shifted uneasily. Some muttered curses. Some spat on the ground, but none answered. Lyra's chest tightened. She stared at the human in shock. Nobody had ever spoken for her like this. Not in front of so many. His words didn't sound like pity. They sounded like truth. The bullies scowled. But instead of attacking, they backed away, muttering about humans being insane. The crowd broke into uneasy whispers. But the laughter was gone. Lyra sat frozen, her hands shaking as she clutched the food bag. Her voice trembled. Why are you doing this?" The human crouched so his eyes were level with hers. "Because you matter." Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, but her life had been filled with nothing but pain. She shook her head. "No, I don't. You don't know me. You don't understand." "Then tell me," he said simply. "Tell me who you are." Her lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. Who was she? An orphan, forgotten, mocked, invisible. That was all she knew. She had no story worth telling. She lowered her head, whispering, "I am nobody." The human's reply was firm. "Not to me." The simple words broke through her defenses, and she felt her chest ache. She didn't know what to do with them. She didn't know what to do with him. The marketplace slowly returned to noise, but Lyra's world had changed. She realized something dangerous. The human was serious. He wasn't leaving. He wasn't mocking her. He offered his hand. Not forcing, only waiting. "Come with me." "You don't belong here." Her breath caught. She looked at his hand as if it were fire. To take it would mean defiance. It would mean leaving everything behind. But everything she had was pain and hunger. Still, fear wrapped around her heart. She pulled her hood lower and whispered, "They will laugh at you. They will hate me even more." "I don't care," he answered. Steady as stone, the words made her chest tremble. Nobody had ever said that. Nobody had ever stood with her when it was easier to walk away. Before she could decide, a group of older aliens appeared. Their voices sharp. "Human, stop this nonsense. That orphan is cursed. She is not female. She is not worth your time." The crowd grew tense again. Suspense filled the air. Would the human finally back down? Would he leave her? But he didn't. He stood tall, his voice ringing through the marketplace. "She has a name. She is Lyra. And from this day forward, she is not alone." The marketplace erupted with gasps, whispers, and shouts. Some laughed in disbelief. Some cursed his name. And others stared in stunned silence. Lyra's heart raced. Her people looked at her with anger, with shock. But for the first time in her life, someone had claimed her. Not as a burden, not as nothing, but as someone who mattered. And that moment, standing in the middle of the crowd, with every eye on them, she realized her world would never be the same again. The next day began with heavy clouds above the city. The market's usual noise was quieter, but whispers spread faster than fire. Everyone knew about the human and the orphan. Everyone spoke about how he dared to stand beside her. Lyra kept her hood over her face as she walked with him. Her steps were small, nervous. Her heart beat so loud she was sure others could hear it. She had never been the center of so much attention before. The mocking stares, the cruel laughter, and now the anger, it was all because of him. But the human walked calmly, his eyes steady, his back straight. He didn't rush. He didn't hide. He carried a bag of supplies as if nothing in the world could shake him. When they reached the port, Lyra stopped. Her chest tightened. Her eyes locked on the small ship waiting near the edge. Its metal was scratched, its paint fading. But to her it looked like freedom. She had never been invited anywhere. Never been given a choice. "You don't have to," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You can leave me here. It will be easier." The human shook his head slowly. "Easier is not always right." Before she could answer, a loud voice cut through the air. "Stop right there!" Alien guards stepped forward, blocking the path to the ship. Their armor was polished, their weapons sharp. The crowd gathered behind them, eager to watch. Their eyes glittered with cruelty. Some smirked, waiting to see the human humiliated. The leader of the guard sneered. "Human, step aside. That orphan is not yours. She belongs to no one. She will stay here." Lyra froze. Her stomach twisted in fear. She knew this would happen. Her people never let go of control. They never allowed kindness to reach someone like her, she whispered urgently, tugging at the human's sleeve. "Please, don't fight them, just leave me." But the human didn't move. His body was still, but his voice carried like steel. "She has a name, she is Lyra, and she is with me." Gasps spread through the crowd. The guards laughed, harsh and cold. "With you? Are you claiming her?" The leader mocked. "Do you not see what she is? Weak, worthless, not even worthy to be called female." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to sink into the ground. She wanted to vanish, but the human stood taller, his gaze sharp as a blade. "I see her," he said firmly. "More than you ever have." The words struck like thunder. The crowd murmured. Some laughed nervously. Others grew angry. The guards snarled, "Step aside, human. This is your last warning." The human took one slow step forward, standing between Lyra and the guards. His stance was calm but unshakable. "No," he said. The tension snapped. The guards raised their weapons. The crowd gasped. Lyra's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of his coat. She whispered desperately, "They will kill you, please. Don't do this for me." But the human's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving the guards. "I will not leave you." The leader of the guards stepped closer, his weapon glowing. "Why? Why risk yourself for her?" The human answered without hesitation, "Because no one else ever did." For a long moment, silence crushed the air. The crowd held its breath, the guards hesitated, unsure how to react to such boldness. Finally, one guard spat on the ground. "Fine, take her. But know this, she will bring you nothing but shame." The human didn't flinch. His hand reached back, gently resting on Lyra's shoulder, guiding her forward. "Then let the shame be mine." The crowd erupted in whispers. Some laughed, some cursed. But others stared in stunned silence for the first time. Someone had openly defied them for her. Lyra's legs felt weak as she walked behind him, each step heavier than the last. She couldn't believe what was happening. She couldn't believe he hadn't abandoned her. Her chest ached with fear, but also something else, something new. Something like warmth. When they finally reached the ship, the human opened the ramp and motioned for her to step inside. Lyra froze, her eyes wide, her hands clutched her chest. I don't belong there." "You belong where you are wanted," he said simply. Her breath caught. No one had ever wanted her. The thought was terrifying, but she took a shaky step forward, then another until her feet touched the ramp. The crowd behind them jeered, shouting insults. But their voices grew faint as the ship's doors closed. Inside, the air smelled of metal and oil. The lights were dim but warm. The space was small, but it was clean. Lyra looked around in shock. Her heart raced. Her whole world had just changed in a single moment. The human set the bag down and turned to her. "This is your home now if you choose it." Her lips parted, her eyes wide. She couldn't speak. Tears filled her vision as she whispered, "Why me?" He met her gaze, steady and unshaken. Because you deserve better. Her tears finally fell, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was right. The ship's doors closed with a heavy thud, shutting out the noise of the marketplace. For Lyra, the silence felt strange. It was not the silence of being ignored, not the silence of loneliness, but a stillness filled with safety. She stood frozen just inside the ramp, her eyes wide, her hands pressed tightly against her chest. The human moved calmly, as if bringing an orphan onto his ship was the most normal thing in the world. He placed his bag of supplies on the counter, pressed a button, and the ship's engines hummed softly. The sound was steady, like a heartbeat. Lyra looked around. Her eyes moved from the narrow hallway to the small seats, from the metal walls to the glowing control panels. She had never been inside a ship before. Her people never let her near anything that mattered. And yet here she was, standing in the center of one. Her voice shook when she whispered, I should not be here. The human glanced at her, his expression calm. You should be exactly where you are. Her chest tightened. Fear and doubt tangled inside her. She lowered her hood slowly, revealing her thin face and tired eyes. Her silver hair was tangled, her skin marked with scars of neglect. She expected him to flinch or look away like everyone else did, but he didn't. Instead, he pointed to a small door at the side. There, he said. That will be your room. Lyra blinked, her mouth opening slightly. My room? The word sounded impossible on her tongue. She had never had a room, never had a space that was hers. She stepped closer, hesitant, and peeked inside. The room was small, just a bed, a blanket, and a small light on the wall. But to her it looked like a palace. Her hands trembled as she touched the blanket, soft and clean. She pressed her fingers against it as if testing whether it was real. The human's voice came from behind her, calm but steady. It's yours. No one will take it from you. Her knees felt weak. She sat slowly on the edge of the bed, staring at the light above for the first time in her life. She felt something she didn't understand. It was not fear, it was not hunger. It was something lighter, warmer. The human left her there for a while, giving her space. When he returned, he carried a tray with warm food, steam rising into the air. He set it down gently in front of her. Eat, he said simply. Lyra stared at the plate. Her stomach growled loudly, but she didn't touch it. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? The human looked at her directly. Because no one else will. Her chest ached. She picked up the spoon with shaking hands and took a small bite. The warmth spread through her. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she forgot the marketplace, the guards, the laughter. She was only a girl eating food without fear. When she opened her eyes again, the human was still watching her. Not with pity, not with cruelty, but with quiet patience. She swallowed hard and whispered, They said, I will never be a female. They said no one will ever want me. The human leaned forward slightly, his voice firm. They were wrong. Her breath caught. Her hands froze around the spoon. She looked at him, trying to see if his words were a trick, but his eyes were steady, his voice unshaken. For the first time, someone had said the words she had always wanted to hear. Her lips trembled, and before she could stop herself, the corners of her mouth lifted. It was small, fragile, but it was a smile. Her first real smile in years. The human didn't point it out, didn't laugh at it. He only nodded once, as if it was natural, as if her smile was something he had expected all along. Lyra quickly covered her mouth, embarrassed. I shouldn't. Yes, you should, he interrupted softly. Don't hide it. Her heart pounded. Her smile faded into a shy laugh, a sound she barely recognized as her own. She had thought laughter belonged only to others, never to her. That night, as the ship drifted in orbit above the alien city, Lyra sat by the small window of her new room, staring at the stars. For so long she had watched them from dirty alleys and cold stone streets, always wishing she could reach them, and now she was inside a ship, closer to the stars than she had ever dreamed. She touched the glass with her fingers and whispered, Why me? From the hallway, the human's voice answered quietly, Because you deserve better and because I choose you. Her chest burned with emotion. She pressed her forehead against the window, tears falling silently down her cheeks. For the first time, her tears were not only from pain. They were from something new, something close to hope. But outside the ship, the alien city stirred. Rumors of the humans' defiance spread through the streets. The guards whispered of shame and dishonor, and the leaders muttered of punishment. Lyra smiled through her tears, but danger was already rising. The world would not forgive what the human had done. The days that followed were quiet only inside the ship, but outside the city was burning with whispers. Lyra sat by the small window of her room, staring at the streets far below. She could almost hear the voices of her people, angry, cruel. Their words had followed her for years, but now they carried a new weight. This time, they weren't mocking only her, they were mocking him. The human has lost his mind, she heard through the thin metal walls when merchants passed near the docks. He claims the orphan is his? Shameful, others said. He'll regret it, muttered the guards, every word stabbed at her heart. She pressed her hands against her chest and whispered, because of me, he is hated now? Inside the ship, the human moved with calm strength, repairing panels, checking systems, cooking food. He never spoke about the rumors, never let the anger of the city touch his face. But Lyra saw the looks of strangers when he stepped out to buy supplies. She saw the way they spat near his boots, how they pointed and laughed one evening. She couldn't hold it anymore. She stood in the narrow hall and stopped him as he carried a box of tools. You should send me away, she whispered. Her voice was small but desperate. They hate you because of me. The human set the box down and looked at her. His gaze was steady. I don't care what they hate. Her throat tightened. But you should, you don't know how dangerous they can be. They will hurt you, they will hurt us both. He shook his head slowly. They already tried, and I am still here. And so are you. His words struck deep, but before she could answer, a loud knock thundered against the ship's outer door. The sound made Lyra jump, her stomach twisted with dread. She knew what it meant. The human pressed a button, and the door slid open. A group of aliens stood outside, older, stronger, and dressed in ceremonial robes. Their faces were stern, their eyes sharp. Behind them, a crowd had gathered, hungry for spectacle. The leader stepped forward, his voice echoing across the docks. Human, you have broken our ways. You took what does not belong to you, and now you will answer. Lyra shrank back, pressing herself against the wall. The leader's voice carried like a blade. Give her back now, or face punishment. The human stepped outside slowly, his boots steady on the ramp. He didn't shout, didn't raise his fists. He only stood tall, blocking the way to Lyra. She is not a thing to give back, he said firmly. She is Lyra, and she chooses to stay. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The leader sneered. A choice? She has no choice. She is not female. She is nothing. Lyra flinched at the words, her eyes filling with tears. She wanted to disappear, to run, but her legs refused to move. She saw the human's back, broad and steady. He didn't step aside, didn't bend, his voice was strong. Then maybe it is not her who is nothing. The crowd roared in shock. The leader's face twisted in rage. You dare insult us? I dare to speak truth, the human replied, calm but unyielding. The guard stepped forward, their weapons glowing. The air crackled with tension. Lyra's breath caught. She wanted to scream, to beg him to stop, but her voice was lost. The leader raised his hand. Take him. The guards moved, but before they could climb the ramp, Lyra found her voice. Her thin body shook, but her words rang louder than she thought possible. Stop! The crowd froze, all eyes snapping toward her. For the first time, she was not invisible. Her voice trembled, but she forced it out. I choose him. I will stay with him. You cannot take me. The silence that followed was heavy. The aliens stared in disbelief. The orphan had spoken, not with shame, not with silence, but with defiance. The leader's face darkened. You dare? You are no female, no one will ever. She is more than you will ever see. The human cut in. His voice thundered like iron. The crowd shifted uneasily. Whispers spreading, some were angry, but some were uncertain. The guards hesitated. Their weapons lowered slightly. The leader snarled, realizing he was losing control. This is not over, human. She will destroy you, and when she does, we will laugh. He turned sharply, the guards following. The crowd broke into heated murmurs before scattering into the night. The ramp closed slowly, leaving silence behind. Lyra sank to her knees, her chest heaving. Tears spilled down her face. Why do you keep doing this? The human knelt in front of her, his voice quiet but steady. Because you matter, and I will not let them decide your worth. Her tears fell harder. She buried her face in her hands, and for the first time, her sobs were not only of pain, they carried relief. But as the ship hummed softly in the dark, both of them knew the truth. The aliens would not stop. Tension had risen too high, and the next time, they would not come only with words. The city did not sleep. Rumors spread like fire in dry grass. Everywhere people whispered about the orphan who dared to speak, about the human who refused to bend. Some called him foolish, others called him dangerous. But all agreed on one thing: this was not finished. Lyra sat on the small bed inside the ship, her knees pulled to her chest. The stars outside the window were bright, but her heart felt heavy. She whispered to herself, "They will never stop. They will never let me live." The human entered quietly. Carrying a small lamp, his face was calm as always, but his eyes showed he understood. "They will come again," he said, "and this time, they will want an answer." Her throat tightened. She looked at him, her voice small. "An answer?" "Yes," he said simply. "They will demand that you choose them, or me." Her chest ached. The thought of standing before her people filled her with dread. For all her life she had been their target, their joke, their shame, and now they would force her to decide in front of everyone. The next morning, the answer came sooner than she expected. The pounding at the ship's door shook the walls. This time it was not a small crowd, it was the council. Elders dressed in heavy robes, guards standing behind them with sharp weapons. The streets were filled with onlookers, pressing shoulder to shoulder, waiting to see the end of the story. The human stepped outside first, his back straight, his voice calm. "What do you want?" The eldest alien stepped forward, his voice sharp like stone. "We are finished with whispers. Human, today the orphan chooses. If she chooses you, she will be cut from us forever. If she chooses us, you will leave and never return." Lyra froze in the doorway, her hands shaking. Her eyes darted across the sea of faces. All the aliens stared at her with cold amusement, waiting for her to crawl back to them in shame. She felt their hatred pressing against her chest. Crushing her breath, the human turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers. His gaze carried no pressure, no demand, only steady patience. He wasn't asking her to choose him. He was only giving her the right to choose. Her legs felt weak, but she stepped forward slowly. The crowd grew quiet, the silence so deep it hurt her ears. The elder raised his hand, his voice booming. "Speak, orphan, who do you belong to?" The words pierced her heart. They reminded her of every night she had slept alone, of every laugh thrown at her, of every cruel word calling her nothing. Her lips trembled, her body shook. She wanted to run, to vanish, but then she looked at him, the human who had picked up her bread, who had spoken her name, who had given her a room, food and dignity. Her fear melted into fire. She straightened her back, her voice trembling but strong enough for all to hear. "I am Lyra," she said, "and I choose him." The silence that followed was like a storm held back by thin glass. The crowd gasped, voices rising in shock. Some shouted curses, some laughed in disbelief, but her words had been spoken, clear and undeniable. The elder's face twisted in fury. "You shame us all." But before he could continue, the human's voice cut through the chaos, calm but sharp. "No, you shamed her long before I arrived today. She chose herself." The guards hesitated. Shifting uneasily, the crowd was restless, some angry, some uncertain. For the first time, the orphan they mocked had stood tall. Her voice had broken the chains of silence. Lyra's knees trembled, but she didn't fall. She stood beside the human, her thin hand gripping his sleeve tightly. Her voice wavered but carried across the crowd. "I am not nothing, I am not invisible, I am not yours, I am mine. And I choose him," the crowd erupted. Shouts echoing through the streets, some threw stones, others screamed, but a few remained silent, their faces unreadable. The elder spat on the ground. "Then leave, both of you. Leave and never return." The human nodded once. Steady, gladly, he guided Lyra back into the ship. The doors closed as the engines roared to life. Dust and sand swirled as the vessel lifted into the sky. The angry cries of the crowd faded below. Inside, Lyra sank against the wall. Her chest heaving, her tears spilled freely. But this time they were not only of fear. They carried relief, strength, and something brighter. The human placed a blanket over her shoulders and said quietly, "You were brave." She shook her head, whispering, "I was afraid." He gave a small smile. "Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is choosing despite it." Her lips trembled, and for the first time she allowed herself to smile openly, no longer hiding it. Her smile was small, fragile, but real. As the stars stretched across the darkness, the orphan who had once been invisible was invisible no more. She had been seen, she had chosen, and she was free. And beside her, the human who had changed everything sat quietly, his presence steady, his gaze unshaken. For the first time, Lyra felt the future was hers to claim.